Nothing you said, did, wore, ingested gave anybody the right ever to hurt you. And so, however you got out of that alive was the exact right thing to do. And so you can never place blame on a survivor.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl, Kate, here. This is the place to find inspiring stories of world-changing women and girls every single week. We have a new, unique story coming your way every single week, so make sure that you subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and everywhere you listen to podcasts to make sure that you don't miss a single episode. Check out our website at onegirlrevolution.com to find all of our 180 some podcast episodes. You can watch our Emmy-nominated documentaries. You can donate to our nonprofit organization to help us continue our critical work to elevate women's voices and their stories, and so much more. Go to onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com today. Today's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast is a really important and very special one. I have been wanting to have this guest on for, I don't know, years now, and it's finally happened. And when you meet someone for the first time and there's just a really special connection, it's like a soul sister connection. Well, that's how I felt with today's guest. On today's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, I welcome Shannon Henry, founder of SASS GO. Shannon herself is a survivor of sexual assault, and she founded SASS GO to empower women and girls, prevent assaults, and to empower other survivors. SASS GO is working to eradicate assault, abuse, and trafficking against women and girls globally through prevention, education, self-defense training, and emergent case consulting. Their dedicated team believes all women deserve to learn the skills needed to save their own lives. The women and girls they serve are as diverse in age, background, and experience as the world that they inhabit, with nearly 60% receiving their services for free or at a reduced cost. SASS GO teaches women to believe that they are worth fighting for through the mantra, "You're strong, you're loved, you're purposed, and you're always worth fighting for." This episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast is a game changer. And while it's a long one, I assure you, like me, will be on the edge of your seat throughout most of it. Shannon has an incredibly inspiring story, and she and SASS GO are doing such incredible work to empower and inspire women and girls around the world. You do not want to miss this incredible episode. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Shannon. Shannon, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
I am so excited to have you on. I have wanted to have you on the podcast for a long time, and I'm just so obsessed with all the amazing work that you're doing to eradicate assault, abuse, trafficking against women and girls globally through prevention, education, self-defense training, which is awesome, and emergent case consulting. And what you're doing is so critical and necessary in our world. And I can't wait to talk about all of that and SASS GO and all the great work that you're doing. But I would love to give you a little bit of space to start to share your own story. And before we get into all the work that you're doing, I would love to hear a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and just a little bit about your life growing up.
Yeah, sure. Well, before we dive there, I just want to thank you. I know I'll probably say it so many times, but thank you for having me on and for creating this space, speaking of space, for women to share their stories in a way that's authentic to them and authentic to the people listening. So you've really done a unique thing, and we're just all so grateful for you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah. So I grew up in small town America, just outside of Columbia, South Carolina, in a little town called Irmo. And with my mom and dad and brother and a cat, and just a great life. Really loved dancing. That's what I did all the time, every day after school, and loved that. And just really had a normal, balanced, kind of healthy life.
What kind of dancing were you into?
Yeah, so it was one of the most competitive dance studios in the country. And so we did everything. So it was mandatory that we take X amount of ballet, X amount of jazz, X amount of, you know, tap. That's what we did. And we did it every day, but it was really fun.
Did you want to be a dancer when you were in the midst of all of that? What was your hopes and dreams?
So when I was little, I wanted to be a ballet dancer in New York City. I quickly realized dancing with one of the most competitive dance studios in the country that I am not the best dancer. I just really enjoy dancing. I was able to be in the elite jazz company, which was a big deal, but I really love dancing, but I had to work hard at it too. And there were other people that were just so naturally inclined, working hard too. But there was a difference and I sensed it. So I thought maybe this is not my path forward for the rest of my life, but I enjoyed it while it lasted.
You had a pretty normal childhood, I would say. You were raised in a good family, had a pretty normal childhood, dancing and involved in community things and events that were going on. But then when you were 16, you had a boyfriend who assaulted you, and that changed your life forever. Can
It did.
you share whatever you feel comfortable sharing about that part of your story?
Sure. So, as with all predators, will say they're very good at hiding who they are underneath, and especially to a naive 16-year-old who grew up in a house with an incredible father who was so loving and kind. And, abusers, they mimic those types of behaviors in order to get you to trust them. And so I did. I trusted him, and he was so kind and funny and thoughtful, and he was older than me. And I think, more than anything, there was that disease to please because I knew that other people liked him and he chose me. And so I felt some sort of gratitude, which is the weirdest thing to say, but for that. And that's a vulnerable time in our lives. And so we dated for a while. We went to the prom together. Everything was fine. And then one day, it was before dance, he asked me to come over to his place. And I didn't want to. Looking back, you can see in my story all the times my instincts went off and said, don't go, don't go. But I didn't even know what those were at the time. And so he asked me to come over and bring him a drink, a Mountain Dew. And when I showed up, there were other people there. It was kind of loud. There was music playing, and it was a random Tuesday. So I remember thinking, this is weird. It feels like a party, but it's just an afternoon after school. So went in, the three guys were sitting on the sofa, and then I greeted him, of course, and handed him his drink and said, I've got to go to dance. And I remember thinking my mom would kill me if she knew I were here right now, because you have your baseline of how you feel in any given situation, and my baseline felt way off. Looking back, something's not right here. And so he asked me, he thanked me for the drink and asked me to come into his bedroom. And I remember not wanting to go into his bedroom, so I kind of, how we do. Without saying it so much, I just need to go, and kind of backed out towards the door. And he said, just come for a second. I want to show you something. And I thought, oh, he's just going to show me something. This is no big deal. As we walked in, I walked in front of him, and he shut the door behind me. And I remember turning and looking, and I watched him, I can still see it, lock the lock. And I thought, why is he locking the door? He's just showing me something. But then I looked at him, and he smiled at me, and he started to kiss me. And I thought, oh, I guess he wanted it to be a private kiss or something. And the kiss, though, was not about me, and it wasn't about us. It was 100% about him. And it felt that way. And I was uncomfortable, and I didn't like it. So gently pushed him away and just said, look, you've been drinking. That was another thing that was introduced in that moment that I didn't know. And I'm not comfortable. I'm going to go ahead and go to dance. I can't be late. And I went to open the door, and that was when he grabbed my wrist, and it hurt. And I remember looking up at him, and everything about his eyes was just different. They were dark, and he was looking at me with a different look than I had ever seen. And he said, get on the bed, or that's next. And he pointed beside his bed on a nightside stand was just a hunting knife. And even then, I remember thinking, he's not talking about that for hurting me. Like, your brain just is trying to figure out what's actually going on and wanting to make it okay, but it was not. And so he did with me what he wanted to do, and stood up when, that was over, and walked me towards the door, and he opened it and kissed me on the cheek and said, "Have fun at dance." And his face went back to normal. Eyes went back to his eyes. And I remember just being in shock and walking out of that room. And I still saw those three people on the sofa who I had known for a long time. And they all kind of high-fived each other as I walked out, as if it had been planned before I got there. And it broke my heart. But I went out to my car, drove to dance, sat through dance, never said anything, went home. My mom would always have dinner out for me. I passed it, went straight upstairs, got a shower, climbed into bed, and I never talked about it again. I just cried myself to sleep. And I remember he sat behind me in a class, and he would put his feet underneath those baskets on your desk, and he would just shake it. And I remember thinking, if I could ever just do anything back, I would, but I couldn't. I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the voice. Nobody had ever told me that anything like that could ever happen. And so that's kind of where it ended. From there, I went on and kind of self-medicated in my own way, because I was 16 and I didn't know how to fix it or make it better. And then it really felt like, I think partially because my life was so safe before that, that the carpet had been pulled out from under me. And I couldn't make sense of the chaos or how I felt. And I didn't want to tell anybody. I was embarrassed, as so many survivors are. I looked inward and blamed myself. Well, why did I go there in dance clothes? Well, why didn't I leave when I knew that something was wrong? I should have listened to my mom, who always said, don't go over to anybody's house. So I had all those thoughts that just plagued me with guilt and shame. I took them all to college and I made sure that I went far away from where I knew he would be at school, and went there. I did find peace in the mountains. I'm an outdoor enthusiast. And so I went to school, but no matter where you go, there it is, and there you are. And so it followed me there. I had a really hard time, and eventually my parents asked me to come home. Grades were slipping, things were not going well, and they didn't know what was happening. I ended up getting counseling here for about a year, and I worked really hard and got my life kind of back in order. It came out what happened. I shared with my parents and my counselor, and my brother and some friends, and then kind of pulled it back together, went back to school, started grad school to get my degree in elementary education, went on to become a teacher and loved that. Met my husband, married him. We have a daughter, Caroline, who's our oldest, and I started having nightmares, though. It all started coming back, and I would dream about something happening to her, and it scared me. And so I realized in that moment, it's not gone. It's still there. And I knew that, but I didn't have the tools to know how to fix it again. So I was kind of stuck in that moment.
And what you experienced in all those different chapters, I would say, on your healing journey. And I'm a firm believer that we're healing our whole lives from things that have happened to us, or, you never really just like, quote unquote, get over something. Right. And that was kind of the culture years ago. I know even like in our parents' generation, where it was like, don't talk about it. And then like, just get over it. And not even, even like the death of a family member or something, like, just get over it. Don't talk about them, just move on. And the reality is we are a puzzle made up of all of the things that have happened to us, all of the things that we've done, the choices we've made. And so we're constantly working through those things, which is why therapy is so important and such a good thing. Even if you feel like, oh, I've healed from everything. Nope. Things always rear their head. Even having children, and then like your daughter, and thinking about that, like it just constantly is just a part of who we are. It's almost like a wound that, it healed, but that scar is always going to kind of be there.
That's right.
But I think what you experienced as a teenager, and through this trauma, not talking about it, That's what so many people, and it's not just women, but I know that women, it happens to a lot where we are in a situation and we're like, well, I could have done something, shoulda, woulda, coulda, I should have done this or I should have done that. And we start to take ownership over something that someone did to us. How did you finally get the courage to speak up about it? Was that through therapy? And then I've obviously your boyfriend, I don't know that justice was ever served with that, but like, how have you found peace with that?
Ooh, those are all good questions. I'm going to start here. And I think you're so right. We are a puzzle or a mosaic. And healing has always been a tricky word for me. I believe we learned how to carry it, how to handle the scar that we have, and how to still smile through it and do all the things that we need to do. Um, and so I like thinking of people almost as one of those big 10-gallon buckets from Home Depot. And, some trauma happens, and imagine that bucket is full of water, and take a rock and write any trauma you want on it: assault, abuse, a horrible accident, cancer, whatever it may be. Dunk it into that water and it floats to the bottom, and people from the outside don't see what's going on the inside or how heavy your load has just gotten. What they do see is the ripples on top that splash all over everybody. And I certainly had a lot of splashes coming out of my bucket, but eventually we as survivors learn how to carry that bucket a little bit better, making sure that those ripples don't get all over everybody else. And so that's a beautiful process that we go through. And there are pieces of that therapeutic pie that are so critical. Counseling was one of them for me, for sure. It helped me to organize my thoughts. It helped me to set into place new thoughts to replace the old ones. I had a critic more than I had a coach in my head. And so I learned to have a coach instead, which was nice. But really, it wasn't until I took that self-defense course that I began to trust my body and my mind again. And that was critical for me. That was the moment where I felt like now something's different about me. Now I feel more confident. I think my biggest fear was that it would happen again. And I think a lot of survivors, you listen to stories, and I teach a lot on how to prevent these things and how to see them coming and how to stop them and neutralize the threat if you have to, with the self-defense, of course. But I think we can't go back in time and give ourselves the tools that we didn't have. I didn't have those tools in that moment to know what to do. And sometimes even when we do have the tools, our body shuts down and says, don't do anything right now. And that's the very thing that keeps us alive. And so we're so intuitive, we're so wise, especially as women, but we tend to just blame ourselves over and over again. So I especially want to say right now, for anybody listening to the podcast, everything that we say moving forward, I want any survivor that's listening to remember one thing: nothing you said, did, wore, ingested gave anybody the right ever to hurt you. And so, however you got out of that alive was the exact right thing to do. And so you can never place blame on a survivor. I always say, if I left my purse out in this room right now and I walked out and I came back and my wallet was gone, it's not because I left my purse out. It's because there was a thief in the room. And it's just the same way with any kind of assault or abuse. And we can't blame ourselves. So I'll start there. And then you asked me, when did I get the strength to speak up? Was that the next question?
Yeah, to share,
Yeah.
to really talk through things. Because I'm a firm believer too that, how can we move beyond something if we don't know how to talk about it, right? And not even moving beyond, but like, how do we take the next step if you don't know how to talk about something that's happened to you?
Well, I'll tell you, the first time, so I started teaching self-defense. I went to that self-defense class and it changed my life. I knew I wanted everybody to have that. Started training other people, and we can dive into that later. From that, somebody asked me to come in and speak and tell my story and then teach a self-defense class. Well, I had never shared my story publicly. I'd only shared it with close friends and family. And it was too early. And I froze on stage and I started crying and I couldn't stop. And it was awful. And so we have to be really kind to survivors and make sure that we're not asking them to do something that they want to be brave for and they want to help other people, but they're just not ready for. It wasn't until I started really working with other survivors and talking to them and seeing their stories and seeing how brave they were that I was like, wait a minute, they're not talking about it publicly, but I can. This is a platform that I can do. So I made sure that I was trauma informed and I knew what I was doing. And I tried to do all the right things so that I didn't hurt anybody in the room when I shared my story. And that's really, I think, just really I rest on the bravery of all the other women that I've served and worked with. That's what fueled me because I don't want it to happen to anybody else.
Yeah. Well, and even just giving women the tools, like you're talking about self-defense, we can use those for so many different things, right? I think in this day and age, unfortunately, we have to be aware of our surroundings constantly. You're walking to your car from your office, you're going to an event. We all watch the news, so we see all these things happening, even getting into an Uber. Things have changed so much for everyone, but specifically women. We have to be so aware of what's going on. And you hear these terrible stories, but it really starts with, okay, we have to know self-defense. Not that it's going to solve all of our problems or protect us from everything, but it's so important for us to know our bodies, know how to handle different things around us, be aware of our surroundings, be aware of what's going on. And so that's really kind of where you started with the SASS curriculum. Watch One Girl Revolution's Emmy-nominated short documentary, The Girl Inside, on our YouTube channel or at onegirlrevolution.com. The Girl Inside features a poignant look at the stories of incarcerated women within Cook County Jail and a life-changing academic course taught by Dr. Laura Biaggi called Storytelling as a Healing Art. This short documentary reunites Dr. Biaggi with 5 of her former students for a special one-day course on the transformative power of our stories and our voices. And what is revealed is the girl inside. Watch the Emmy-nominated short documentary, The Girl Inside, today on YouTube or at onegirlrevolution.com. Can you talk about, because I know you talk on your website a lot about, and we'll get into SASS GO and all the great stuff that you're doing, but what does SASS stand for? And tell me about that curriculum that really changed your life, that was a turning point.
Yeah, so SASS stands for Surviving Assault, Standing Strong. And there was a man who developed this curriculum because he had worked with a lot of survivors, and he began to get frustrated because he was always working with them in the after, and he wanted to prevent it. He had 2 teenage daughters at the time, and he had all these different certifications in martial arts. And he did some research and realized, how women are most often approached, how they're most often attacked. And then he set up a curriculum that's really incredible because it takes our greatest strengths and uses them against our attackers' greatest weaknesses. A lot of times you'll see people training and well-intentioned and doing a really great job, but training kind of from the upper body, which is not our natural strength. It's actually one of our greatest weaknesses unless we really focused on it. Our hips and our legs are where we're designed to really produce power. And so I took that class and I remember just thinking, this is amazing. Like, I never knew my body could do this. And I wish I had known this before. And it's one thing to tell a woman or a girl to stand up for herself and say no. But when you're looking down the eyes of somebody whose eyes have just turned black, they're much bigger than you, they play football, they're strong, it's really hard to find your voice. And so I think having that ahead of time, knowing that you're capable of saying no, making it a full sentence and walking out of the door. And if something turns wrong physically, that you're able to handle it, it's huge. It was a game changer for me. So I wanted that for everybody. I wanted every girl that I could ever get in touch with to have it. So I started teaching and training just locally, and I loved it. I loved seeing people get empowered, and people were eating it up, and I got too busy and I thought, okay, I need more instructors. And so made some more instructors here locally, and that was wonderful. But then we started getting calls from across the country. Well, my sister lives in South Carolina and just had a class in Charleston, and now we want one in Chicago. Can you come here? And I was like, oh, they wanted them in LA and DC. I remember these big cities calling and thinking, what are we doing? This is awesome. And so went in through the advice of a mentor and created a nonprofit so that we could get there because not everybody could pay for it. And so created the nonprofit. And really, it all started with the self defense portion. And we would go in and train, and then we would do our prevention education series. So you asked about that curriculum. So with the self defense curriculum, we start at age 5 and go up to 115, however you want to be and old you want to be and come, we're here for you. And we have classes for little girls. So that's our Sassafras class. And it's for elementary school girls and their moms. And it really is the building blocks of understanding their voice. And it's made specifically for them and where they are in life. And then the middle school girls really get a good dose of situational awareness. So do the little girls, but especially online. That's one of the most dangerous places where they are right now, where our predators are. And so they get that, but they also get physical moves, the way that we're most often attacked or grabbed. And then there's the SASS 1 course and SASS 2, which covers, you know, some of the greatest situational awareness threat assessment skills for women 16 and up. And SASS 2 takes it all to the ground. So if you're knocked to the ground, we have that. And then we have a weekend that we do, which is amazing. I know you said you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I was looking through it on the website, and I hope everybody who's listening signs up to go. It looks amazing.
It's so fun. So it's the I Will Survive weekend. And it grew out of so many people kept asking, this is great. I love it. I love learning all the self-defense, but I'd also like to learn weapons and more about threat assessment. I'd also like to learn about survivor care, and I'd love to know how to keep myself safe online. So we gathered some of the greatest experts from across the country, FBI, former FBI agent. We have the senior vice president of Gavin DeBecker and Associates, which Gavin DeBecker wrote The Gift of Fear. It's a huge threat assessment tool for women, the Bible of it, if you will. And so he comes and does all of the situational awareness and threat assessment skills. We do the self-defense portion. We have an incredible firearms team that helps women learn how to safely use a firearm and when they can and how. And then we have an expert that comes in and speaks to care afterwards and how to take care of yourself and different tools that they need to do that. And then lastly, we have a guy that's former CIA that comes in and shares with how to stay safe online, really for our kids, but also for us, for sure. And so for a lot of the women that come, they are survivors. Kara Robinson, who you've had before, came to our most recent one. But there are also women who've been through domestic violence, and really that staying safe online is important to them too when they have somebody they know is continuing to stalk them or want to do them harm. So it's just a beautiful weekend. We also eat s'mores and have fun and sing karaoke one night like crazy banshees and have the best time. It's just a really powerful weekend.
And we need that too, right? We need community and sisterhood. And especially in this day and age, it's like we need to stand together, and women are stronger when they stand together, even when they sing karaoke together.
That's right. And it's a sisterhood for sure. And using your voice in that way where it's fun. It's the best weekend. It's one of our favorites.
All the different elements of everything that you're doing, and even that online element. I know that that's something that parents are overly aware of and worried about and nervous about. And, how do you train your kids? We're just living in a different world, even than any of us lived in, I remember when Facebook came out, I think I was like towards the end of college, and people were like dipping their toe into social media, but now it's just all encompassing. All kids are just on all these different social platforms, and knowing how do you navigate that, and getting your kids talking about it and things to look for. It's so important to train our children.
It's so important. And one of the things, that we love to talk about is stair stepping. So in any situation, but especially we'll take this one with kids, our kids are inundated, you're right, with social media, and it's really dangerous. It's a great place for a predator to hide. And I like to think about if I'm an alcoholic, where am I going to hang out? I'm going to hang out where I can get alcohol. If I'm a pedophile, where am I going to hang out? I'm going to hang out where children are vulnerable, and that is certainly online. And so, the safest way to keep your kids away from online predators is to what? Not to let them go online at
Right.
all, right? No phone, no internet, nothing, and just go off the grid. And that would be great if that was something that somebody felt comfortable doing. But if they're not, then you go, okay, not that step. Let's back up one. Now we're looking at, okay, maybe they have a tablet and they're able to look at that, but they do it in the room with me. I'm right there with, so you just kind of stair step and determine for your family what is best. And there's so many good things that we can put on our phones to safeguard them and really give us alerts. We have Bark on all of our stuff and Life 360. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's not because of them. And I reiterate that over and over again. I trust you, but I do not trust the device or the people that are on it.
And just building that relationship too with your kids. I think a lot of times parents, they're busy, they're tired at night, and it's like, oh, just give your kid the tablet, just give them the phone to play on it. And how quickly a predator can just be on the kid can be on their radar. And so we need to be looking for opportunities to build these conversations. Like you said, like, I trust you, but I don't trust the other people. I think that's such a good note for parents to take on that. And then also, like, picking specific things. I know there's a lot of concern with Snapchat because things can disappear and somebody could send you something and you have no proof, right? A kid could tell you like, oh, somebody sent me this and explain it to you, but there's no proof. So even just being aware, it's important for parents to be aware of how different apps work, how different social media works. And when your kid asks to be on one of those things, learn it. Just so you at least know. You don't even have to necessarily be on it, but know how these things work. And if you don't know, you can ask another teenager. I feel like I do that with like TikTok. I'm like, I have no idea how this works. Like, somebody else tell me.
Asking an older teenager is always a great thing to do, because usually they'll be pretty honest with you, especially if they're not in your family, and they'll say, I wouldn't do it. I think it's important. A lot of times, I think we do more research on the next car we're getting than the app that we're putting in our kids' hands. And it's really scary. So that's important to do that research. I also think it's really important to give your kids the fundamental skills of understanding how predators approach kids. And, depending on their age, once they're in elementary school or anytime they have any kind of device on their hands, being able to say, hey, there are tricky people in the world. Do you agree that not everybody's nice? And kids always say yes. And we've trained thousands of them. They always go, oh yeah, not everybody's nice. And you can say, well, do they wear a shirt that says I'm a bad person and I do bad things? No, they'll laugh. And I'll say, okay, well, not only are they around the world, but they're right here on your phone or on your tablet. And so we have to be careful. So if somebody wants to talk to you in the middle of Roblox, right, and they want to know where you're going and they want to give you candy or, some kind of thing that's special gift inside Roblox, and you don't know them, is that kind of weird? Yeah. It is kind of weird. Maybe they could be bad, but I really want that gift. I really like it. Okay. And then just talking through it with them so that what you find is, and parents say this, and I know this from my own kids, your child comes to you and go, it happened. I just saw it. Somebody came to give me something and then they wanted to ask me a question. So I ignored them. And they get so proud because they become the investigator and they're in charge of their own world, and giving them that kind of control is really important.
It's empowering, right? I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but it's so empowering. We need to empower our children, our kids, and also ourselves, right? Through what you're doing, you're working with so many different people, different ages, different backgrounds. And we all have these instances where we need to just be empowered to say, yes, this is okay. No, this is not okay. And to protect ourselves.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids. I think a lot of parents worry that if they talk about these things, that it'll give their kids nightmares. I think it will make them ask questions. But if you do it, and every parent knows their child best, if you do it in a way that empowers them, like you said, instead of, we want them to be prepared, not paranoid. it's really powerful. And we do have, for any parents that are listening, for middle schoolers or elementary school children, we do have a curriculum online that's totally free on our SASS GO website, and they can go and listen to all the tricks and tips that we can give parents on how to keep their kids safe when they're in those vulnerable ages, for sure.
Let's talk about that. So I know that, people can go to one of your trainings in person. They can
Yeah.
invite you to come wherever they live. Detroit, I'm like already thinking, I'm like, oh, we ought to do something here. But people, when they come to your trainings, how does that work? And then I know you also have a lot of online work that you do, even internationally. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So coming to a training, if we're talking about coming to a self-defense class, that's something that we set up in communities. We have 29 instructors across the country. And so they set up courses in their communities, but they also will travel across state and set them up in other places. And so that's a wonderful thing that we do. Typically, it's a 2-hour session or an hour and a half for the littles. And you learn all these different skills. And it really is, if I never see you again, here is worst case scenario. If this happens, here's what you can do. Here's how powerful your body is. You are prepared for this. You are strong. You are loved. It's a girl fest. It's Girls Fight Club. It really is. And then we leave that place with this new power. Everybody leaves standing up a little bit taller because they're like, I can do some serious damage. And it's wonderful. And it's meant to be used when you can't run and you can't get help. So it is worst case scenario, but now you're equipped. You have these tools, and we don't give anybody anything they didn't have before they walked in. They have the ability. We just teach them to aim and fire, which is really nice. And then it creates this little community, and it's so beautiful. So that's what a self-defense class kind of feels like. It's very empowering. We do national trainings. We just trained for CAW, which is the Conference on Crimes Against Women. We love doing that, and we can talk about our case consulting in a little bit, but that is more on a national level. So we've got our community, and then we've got the national trainings that we'll do. Those tend to be on collaborating across law enforcement, judicial, systems and things like that. But we also do things on advocating for yourself and self-defense when we're at those events. So it just depends. They can call and ask us to do anything, and we'll speak to it. But then internationally, we have a lot of curriculums that are out there that, like, for example, there's an area in South Africa that is using our prevention education curriculum in their schools and with their nonprofits to help women. It's called the 10 critical skills. It's 10 critical skills to save your own life. And that is being utilized in an area, especially in South Africa, with the highest femicide rate in the world. So that's an honor. Internationally, also, we had the U.S. State Department and the U.S. Embassy send us some women from Uzbekistan, which was wonderful. And we trained them. So now those women are training in their country in self-defense. And that's a country that is riddled with a lot of domestic violence, and really coming into a new revolution where they're really starting to focus on it and go to the next level with laws and caring for their women and setting up support systems. So that's some of the work that we do. And then, of course, the I Will Survive weekend. And it always feels like a sisterhood. It just does. It's so nice to get together with women and go, especially knowing that 1 in 3 of us are going to experience violence or abuse, getting together and going, I'm not alone. And I'm here and I'm with you. And now I have these tools and this mental mindset that's totally a game changer, and a community to do it in. It's really nice.
It's normalizing something that everybody should learn. I was thinking as you were talking that it's like every school should be teaching self-defense classes, honestly. Every college. And I know that you teach some courses at University of South Carolina. How did that happen?
Yeah. So and I want to go back and touch on schools, because I think that's important, teaching in schools. We started that. The man that trained me originally taught it at the University of South Carolina, and he handed it over to me. And I have taught there for 10 years now. And it is the #1. I don't know if it still is. I haven't looked in this like in a year, but for about 5 or 6 years, it's been the number one course at the University of South Carolina, rated by students on Rate My Professor. And so I don't believe for one second that that has anything to do with me. I think it's what you just said. It's everybody knows they need it, but once they get in it, they're like, this is so powerful. Everybody should take this. And so I love that we have an instructor also at Salt Lake Community College, which is this huge university. It's just as big as the University of Utah. And those college classes are so much fun because it is at such a critical age for those girls to learn how to stand up and fight for themselves. And it is a whole semester long. So they do it once a week and then they go home and practice, and they get everything from a simple grab to strangulation all the way to guns, knives, and multiple assailants and how to take them out. So it is a beast of a curriculum, but it is awesome. And they get a PE credit for it. So that's really fun.
Donate to One Girl Revolution's nonprofit organization to help us continue our work, highlighting inspiring women and girls that are changing the world through their lives, promoting their work and their organizations, and building a powerful and positive force out in the world dedicated to empowering women, their voices, and their stories. Donate at onegirlrevolution.com/donate. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com/donate.
So education wise, I do wish, knowing statistically that 1 in 3 women will experience assault or abuse, you can see very quickly that that's an epidemic. And so I would love, healthcare crisis is a healthcare crisis. And the quickest way to reach the most children is through our education system. And the goal is to prevent these things. We provide support for after, but we really want to prevent it. And so one of the ways we can do that is equip them with the skills to know how to detect it and deter it, and then neutralize it if they have to. But what we are finding, I'm really encouraged by schools that are diving in, universities, colleges, a lot of private schools. So we have private schools, especially throughout South Carolina, that every year train all their classes, elementary all the way up to high school. But we do find that the majority of the time they're private schools because they have the funding, they can do it, but I would like to see our public education system put some resources and effort into doing this as well for our kids that are in public schools like mine.
I think it's so important. And now I'm like already thinking about all the different people that I'm like, okay, I don't have children yet, but I'm like everybody else that I need to enroll in self-defense classes. And honestly, all of us should be doing it too. And I love even like that you're working with the littles and then adults. And, if we all can protect ourselves, it just lowers the numbers. It's not going to cut everything out. It's not going to cut out every single assault, of course, but helping people and children especially know how to take care of themselves is so important.
The coolest thing too about training littles, and the reason, because we didn't start off doing that. We started off with 14 and up. But every time I would go in to train women, and I would say, you are strong, you are loved, you are always worth fighting for, and you have purpose in this world, I'd see so many of them start to cry. And I thought, all right, let's get to the middle school girls, because clearly life has beat these women up, all of us, 1 in 3 of us at least. And so we started training middle school girls. And when we would say, you are strong, you are loved, you are full of purpose and always worth fighting for, they'd start to tear up. Not as many, but they would. And I thought, fine, we'll go to the littles. That's my area anyway, is elementary education. So we developed this amazing curriculum in partnership with all these incredible experts that were doing great things. And when we got down to the little girls and we said, you're strong, you're loved, you're purposed, and you are always worth fighting for, they go, I know, because that's just, the world hadn't gotten to them yet. And they feel so emboldened. And what's beautiful is then when you've told them that, and an imposter comes in and says, no, you're not worth anything, and you're not as good as you think you are, they go, that's not true. And there's not something wrong with me. There's something wrong with you for saying it. And I love that.
That's amazing. I'm getting chills as you're talking about that, because it's so much, and that's so much of what One Girl Revolution stands for, is something happens oftentimes in our lives where we just get chipped away, where we start out as this feisty, happy little girl that believes that we are purposeful, that we have purpose, we have a reason why we're here, we want to fight for our dreams, and then things happen, and little by little we become some caricature of who we think the world wants us to be. We don't see our value, we don't see our purpose. And so really reminding little girls and reminding women of that is so important and so critical. And there's so much that we can learn from children too. That's another thing that I've been thinking about. I have this 15-year-old that's on the podcast this week, and I've learned so much from her, and I'm so inspired by her because she's just this firebrand of a person that's changing the world.
I love that. And I think you're right. Kids can remind us of who we wanted to be, and then to go after that again and live into that is a big deal. And I say this all the time, but before you can ever teach a woman self-defense, you have to tell her she's worth fighting for and that she's loved and has purpose, because she'll never fight for herself if she doesn't believe that. And that's part of the reason. I think that's, if I could pick out a signature flavor or spice that's in our recipe, it's making sure before we ever go in to the fighting that we understand who we actually are as humans, and even collectively just to say, all right, I agree. That is who I am. I was made on purpose for a purpose. I'm not an accident. And let's do this thing, and let's learn how to protect that, because there'll never be another you.
Shannon, you mentioned case consulting. Can you talk about that work that you do?
Yeah, so that kind of evolved after working with, we've trained over 15,000 women on 4 different continents, and really looking at where there were gaps in the system that were failing them. So, let's just pretend it's an assault that has just happened from a neighborhood kid in your child's bedroom, and you call the police come, they do the report, and then that's a whirlwind. You shut the door, and now it's just your family. And what we were finding is they didn't know what the next step was. How do I support her? What do I say? What do I not say? Who do I call? Like, I know there's all these nonprofits. Do I want to take her somewhere where it says rape on the outside and that's permanently? It was just all these questions they had, and they needed a soft place to talk. And so, through all of our trainings and all the work that we've done, we've created this Rolodex, if you will. And I know that's an old term, but a contact list of all these experts that we've worked with. And so as people would come in, one of the first things we look at, and when they're talking to us, is what are your basic needs? Are you a survivor that needs food and money and a new place to live? Or are you good with all of that, and now you just need somebody to help you navigate the legal system? Do you need, childcare support? What is it that you need? And then how can we stick beside you and surround you with a team that will give you the best advice on how to move forward? Even making sure that team is the best team for this, that they're trauma informed, that they do this all the time, that they know cases like this, that they can share with you specific tips that will help you get through what you're going through. Because when you look at survivors, they come in all different forms from all different types of trauma, right? But a lot of times they're kind of going through this storm, and it's like being on the boat, like a big yacht, and it's being tossed back and forth, and it's awful. But a lot of the survivors in those storms are on a yacht. They've got the support they need. They've got a good home. They've got great parents that are seeing them through this, and, money to fight the legal battles and all of that. But then you've got this middle ground survivor that is kind of in a rowboat going through the storm and really having a hard time in a lot of different ways, whether it's through resources or mentally, it's just hard and they need some more support, because it's all hard, but it's about the support system. And then you've got your people that are on driftwood, and they are barely making it. They can barely see over the waves, much less get out of bed in the morning and brush their teeth. And so each one of them is looking for the harbor. They're looking for that light. They're looking for, where's the other side? I just picked up a turtle in the middle of the road the other day, and I stopped in the middle of the road. I stopped traffic on both sides, and I picked up this turtle and got him to the other side. And I was like, sorry. And I got back in my car, and I thought, that's what every survivor needs. They need somebody to go, you're in a spot where there's so much coming at you and you don't want to do anything but go in your shell. Come here. I will take you to the grassy side and we will do this together. And so that's what we do when we do case consulting. People tend to send people to us and say, what can you do to help me with my daughter who's just experienced sexual assault? A lot of times it's families who really need help in understanding how to navigate it too. So it's a great team that we have. We have specialists that I wrote down some things before we started talking, but we have experts in strangulation, staged aquatic deaths, forensic experts, but attorneys that even fight institutional complicity and will help, moms who've lost their daughter to domestic violence read the autopsy report. It's things you wouldn't even think about. And we've created this menagerie of experts that can really help them navigate it all, which is, you can't find that necessarily anywhere else. And I love it. Most advocates work for a system, whether it is prosecutor's office or, specifically for a healthcare system. We work for the survivor. And we don't replicate the services of crisis centers. This is second stage care. The crisis is over. Now help me get to the other side. And that's what we do.
You are creating the system when it comes to that. And there are so many facets, like you shared with a survivor. There are so many different facets and so much that's being thrown at you all at once. And every single person's story is so different and their situation is so different. Sometimes they don't have the support system, or they're leaving a domestic abuse situation and they just need to get to a safe place that their abuser or assaulter doesn't know where they are. There's just so much work to be done. And so I love what SASS GO is doing. And I just feel like it's grown and evolved so much since you've started, and it just continues to grow, which leads me to, I want to ask you about the banks. You're building a state-of-the-art campus for survivors, their families, and the professionals that serve them. What can you tell me about that?
So it's funny. We just presented, I told you, at the conference on crimes against women. And when I was talking to one of the women on the way to the conference that was in our car, she said, "So what do you do?" And I explained, and she looked at me after we were talking about case consulting, especially, and she said, "So you went rogue. You just went rogue." And I said, "We did. We went rogue. We decided we wanted to fill in the gaps where people needed that filled in, and we're very flexible and we can do that." And so with the banks, it really is us going totally rogue yet again, but pulling all of this into one location. That's all the banks is. Right now, when people call and they need help, we can meet with them virtually or in person, depending on where they are, and sit down and even pull the team together. So let's just pretend for a second you came to me and an assault had just happened. We would sit down and look at what your needs were, where you were mentally, physically, what you needed. And then we would surround you with the counseling and the legal services and all of the people that you needed on your team to give you that advice to move forward and put it in order. Hey, today we are only worrying about this. That is all you have to do today. And sometimes it's all I want you to do today is go find something that makes you breathe a little bit deeper. We'll do all the other stuff today and we'll get back to you tomorrow. And so now with the banks, we're creating a space where people can come in and really focus on that inner room that's beautiful. A lot of times when you go to places to get services, it looks like, this stoic, cold, rundown building. That's one of the things that we want for this. It's going to be beautiful and aesthetically pleasing and serene. And so coming in, being able to get our teams to surround them right there on the spot is really important. We'll have counseling and advocacy on site as well as legal services. And then on top of it, if they decide, okay, I'm here, I want your team to surround me, I want to do this, but I need a place to stay and just be away from the world for a minute, we'll have our private side in the back, which is called the refuge on this acreage. And that is where women and girls can stay and get the counseling they need on site and the art and recreational therapy and really learn about their bodies and what they're going through. There's so many elements to that that will be right there. They'll be fed incredible food and just have a great place to stay in childcare should they need it. But also there in the more public side, we will do our trainings that we do for law enforcement, healthcare systems, and educational systems, and everybody else that we train to work together so that we're providing the best we can for these survivors. And once we do that in South Carolina, and we're never replicating services, as I said, we're not the crisis center, but we can lead people to the crisis centers who are already doing this incredible work. It will feel like a more cohesive state where I can call this number. I know they're going to support me in the aftermath and carry me through to where I need to go. And that's what we want, is a continuity of care in our state. And then hopefully we'll copy and paste it in other states and have the banks in maybe your state or in, Texas or wherever. That's the goal.
It's so needed. And I love the holistic approach that you take, that SASS GO takes with every single person that they interact with, but even the banks takes it a step further. You've gone rogue, and now you're really building this holistic approach for survivors, for their children, for everyone to come together. And I really hope, in our dream of dream worlds, I hope that we see that replicated throughout every single state, because it's something that's so needed and so necessary in our world.
I totally agree. Thank you.
I know that you work with so many different people and you've encountered so many different stories. I know every single one is inspiring in its own way. I'm a firm believer that every woman is a one girl revolution, and, that we all have the power to change the world through our lives. But Shannon, is there a story, if you're thinking about SASS GO and throughout all the years and how things have evolved and changed and grown, is there a story that really kind of embodies SASS GO to you, or one that really touched your heart in a special way?
Oh, there's so many. There's so many. And I feel bad narrowing it down to one, but I will say there is one that touches my heart so much, and it continues to, which is really nice. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, Lauren McCluskey was at the University of Utah, and she was a track athlete. And she fell in love with a man who lied about his identity and his background. And she asked for help over and over again, knowing that he was threatening her and very dangerous to her. And unfortunately, the system failed her and she didn't get the help that she needed. And he showed up on campus and he killed her. And that was horrific. And in the aftermath, we got a call from the University of Utah where she was, and asked if we would come in and do a training for them, for their faculty, staff, all their students, for everybody. And we did. And it was a beautiful moment. I remember when I was sitting there and people were coming into the training, my colleague Brett was speaking on stage, and as this one girl walked in, she said, "Do I sign in here?" And I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Are you a sorority member?" Because they got points for coming to the event. And she said, "No, I ran track." And I was like, And I just got up and hugged her. And I said, "I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so sorry for your loss and what you're going through." And she said, "Thank you." And, we had a moment, and she sat down. And she came back later because we did a self-defense training too. And she came to that. And afterwards, she came up to me and she said, "This was the greatest thing that I've done to feel better. I don't know how to explain it." And it sounded like me when I had been through what I've been through. And I thought, I want it for everybody. And she said, "I want this for everybody." And I thought, yeah. And she was kind of the mama hen of the track and field team and was very close to Lauren. And so she was struggling. She was struggling leaving her house, being concerned about all the other track, athletes on the team, and really was internalizing all of it and not doing well. And so we talked a lot after that. And at some point she said, "You know what? I've got nationals in a week, but I know you have instructor training coming up. I want to be an instructor and I want to do this and I want to take it everywhere." And I was like, well, let's do it. So anyway, she is now an instructor with us, and she teaches, she's in Wyoming. She's our Wyoming instructor, but she teaches all over the country. She's amazing, and she always does it in Lauren's honor. which is such a beautiful thing and a beautiful way to honor Lauren. Lauren's mom is deeply involved with the organization too. She just set up classes after the murders of the students at the University of, not Washington,
Idaho,
Idaho.
I think. Yeah.
Yes. And so we trained in that community thereafter too. And that was Mesa teaching. So she's a great example of going from feeling powerless, feeling hopeless, to then empowering others with the skills that you learn. And I'm so grateful for her while honoring her best friend. And so I just think it's beautiful. That's a beautiful story.
We can't change what's happened in the past, of course, but we can change the trajectory of our future and the future of so many others, especially up and coming. I think about that with the up and coming generation, and we can do so much. And even sometimes it's just in the little things, right? Becoming an instructor and teaching self-defense, or volunteering, doing something. We all can do something. It doesn't have to be a big thing. We don't have to start an organization necessarily, but we can all do something to change the world.
I agree. I think we are all born with this shape. Shape, I always break down to an acronym. We have our special gifts, things that we're divinely good at, that we just were born into us. And then we have our heart, and it's what we care about the most. What breaks our heart is a good way to determine what you're really passionate about. And then we have our abilities, things that we've learned in life through education or dance classes or whatever it may be. And then we have this personality that's so unique to us, whether we're introverts or extroverts or just a combo of both. And then we have our experiences. And for me, it was an assault, but for Mesa, it was the murder of a dear friend. And for others, it's growing up with a brother that has autism and learning how to navigate that. But no matter what our shape is, that can help us. If we write it down and we look at it, it can really help us determine, how are we the one girl revolution to somebody who's going through what I'm going through, and how can I be that voice and that light? And so thank you for shining the light so beautifully the way you do on each of these girls and women, and showing just what can be done when we really go after who we are and what we're meant to do. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you, Shannon, and you're just such an inspiration. And I can't wait to see where you go and where SASS GO goes from here. I know there's so much building, and over the next couple of years, I know you're going to just grow and evolve and continue to do so. But what can people do to support your work at SASS GO?
Yeah, so there's so many ways to get involved. If they go to sassgo.org, they can find out more ways to get involved, whether it's donating time or resources, or just spreading the word. I know you talk about that a lot, of what our organization is doing, because you never know with 1 in 3 in your community who might need to hear it or see it or have a class in their area. And so we're here to serve. We're happy to serve, and we love it when people partner with us. Even if it's just, hey, I have a studio and I'd love to host a class here. Those are all great things that you can do to really give back to your community and be a socially responsible community member.
And I want to encourage everyone who's listening to follow you on social media. And I will, of course, put your website and all the ways to get in touch with you and all of your social media links in the show notes, because it's just such a great and easy way to support the work that you're doing. But I also encourage people to share what you're doing, because you never know who in your community, who in your social realm might be going through something and need something like SASS GO. And so that's an easy way that you can just share and let it go. And there it is out in the universe. And if someone needs it, they can go to one of the trainings or maybe reach out to SASS GO. And so that's just an easy way to spread awareness and also help survivors not feel so alone.
That's right.
If you like what you're hearing on this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. We have new inspiring episodes coming out every week, and you don't want to miss a single one. Subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast today. What would you say to a survivor who's listening? Maybe they haven't shared their story. Maybe they're walking through the chapter of what you were going through from 16 through when you finally went home, went to college and were struggling and went home. Maybe somebody's in that kind of chapter of their journey, what would you say to that survivor?
Well, I would start with you are strong. If there was advice that I could give a survivor, I would start with you are strong, you are loved, you are full of purpose, and you are always worth fighting for. Sometimes that's hard to remember. And I would also add that I know they feel alone. The abuse and assault happens behind closed doors. It's not like when we have a hurricane or a tornado and FEMA runs in and all these people are there, Red Cross, to help you. It is something that happens behind closed doors. And until we come forward and share it with even just one trusted friend, we can't get the help that we need. But you are not alone, and we will be there for you. There's a community of people that are willing to be there for you. Just reach out. That would be my biggest suggestion, because when it's inside, it just festers and hurts so bad. But there are people, good people, that want to support people that are survivors.
And it's so important for all of us to be aware and have knowledge and know the organizations like SASS GO that are out there, that if someone shares their story with us, that we know where to direct them. Because I think that that's something in our world that we don't often talk about, survivor stories or our own experiences or our own journeys. And so we need to normalize this conversation that we've been having and the resources that are out there, so that we know if someone shares their story with us, that we know what types of resources are out there too.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say, number one, you can be the resource. You can listen. That's really all they need in the beginning. They're not coming to you as a investigator or as a counselor or anything like that. They just need you to listen. But then on top of it, once you've listened and you've affirmed, because that's what they need to hear, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Even just saying, I'm so sorry that happened, lets them know that you believe them. And that's one of a survivor's biggest fears, is that you won't believe them. So just, I'm so sorry that happened to you and I'm here, is so important. But then they can always go on our website at sassgo.org and then /resources. And it will, clicking on the topic that you're most concerned with for this person, it will lead you to local resources around you, around the United States. And so want your listeners to know that too, when they're looking for that support for their friend or their family member.
And like I said, I will put your website and your social media in the show notes so people can easily find it all. And Shannon, you are a One Girl Revolution in my world, and I can't wait to continue to follow everything that you're doing. But I'm curious to know, who is a One Girl Revolution in your life? Who is a woman or girl? And I know there's many, but I'm asking you to choose one who inspires you.
There are so many women in my life that I love. I tend to really be inspired by courage. I think courage is, it's hard to come by, pure courage in a direction that is good in the world, not courage to be mean, courage to do good things. I tend to go back to my hero, that technically, I'm looking in the Bible. I'm looking at Esther, and she's my hero that I've always kind of looked up to, as far as being in a predicament, being in a horrible situation, where she's basically trafficked into this home where she's part of this harem and with this king. And then at some point, she's trying to save her people from being hurt and being enslaved. And it feels very, that makes sense to me. That resonates really well to me. But it is another leader who comes to her and says, look, there's strategy we can use here, but it's going to require you to be courageous. And you're going to have to go get the ear of the officials and the people that are doing the work and doing these bad things. And you're going to have to really work hard to get things moving forward in a different direction. And he says to her, perhaps you were born for a time such as this. And that always leapt off the page at me. Perhaps we were born for a time such as this. So I think we're the heroes, each one of us individually. And I just love that phrase. I love what she did, that she stood up and had the courage to move forward. And it revolutionized the entire country. One woman one thing, one bit of encouragement to her, and it changed everything. And that's what you're doing by putting out this podcast. And that's hopefully what we're doing with our work with SASS GO.
Courage is so important. And like you said, it's lacking in our world. And sometimes courage is just that one step, that one yes, that first step, and see where the chips fall.
Yes.
Just a moment of courage. And we all have that. We're all stronger than we know. And like you said, perhaps we were born for a moment like this, for a time like this. Joan of Arc has that great quote that is, I was born to do this, and I think about that from time to time. It's like, no, I was born to do this. And we need to tell the world, or the people that tell us we can't, or the people that say that we're not worthy or we don't have purpose, like you're training these little girls are these feisty little warriors that we can learn from, these little revolutionaries that are like, yeah, of course I am.
That's right. And I think we all have this one sentence. I train women on this. We all have this one sentence in our mind, our critic, that says, oh, you're not really a leader, or you're not really strong enough to do that, or you're not smart enough to do that, or you don't have everything you need to get started. Why would you do this? And when we listen to that critic, we find that we're stagnated and we stay behind and we don't do and live into what we were born to do. I think if we just dive in with everything that we have, look at your shape, dive in, make it happen, and you never know the ripple effect it'll have in a positive way on so many lives, just like what you've done. So yeah, I agree with you. I'm all in. Go Joan of Arc.
And that's exactly what you're doing. But before I let you go, Shannon, I always end this podcast on one question. So I'd like to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
If I could leave women and girls with one message, it would be to believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are meant to be here on purpose, for a purpose. There will never be another you with your shape, with your gifts, with your talents, and your personality and abilities and experiences. And it is critical that each one of us is here to support one another with the gifts and talents that we don't have ourselves. We're all here to work together to make this place a better place and a safer place. And we have to be willing to fight for ourselves in order to take up the space that we deserve and we're built for. And so I would just beg them to believe that they're here on purpose for a purpose, and then dive into it without regard to anything that would hold them back. No critic, only a coach. Just dive forward and do it, because we need them, and there'll never be another them.
It's exactly right. And I always say that we're as unique as our fingerprint. And if we believed that, if we truly believed that, how differently we would live our lives. And it's true. So Shannon, you are just so amazing. And I'm so grateful to be connected with you and SASS GO. And I can't wait to continue to follow everything that you're doing and stay in touch with you. But thank you so much for being on the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you right back. Thank you for everything you're doing and for uplifting all of these women and girls. I know, just like Oprah Winfrey said, you may never see everything that happens and the waves and the generations of women that are different because of what you've put out there in the world through your podcast. But I know that you're blessing a lot of people through what you're doing and encouraging and giving them the courageousness to stand up and do the things that they want to do in their own lives, just by looking at you and what you've done and the people that you're showcasing. So thank you. Thank you for creating this space.
Well, thank you for being a part of it, Shannon. And I'm just so grateful again to have you on. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com.